If you've played pickleball for a little while, you are probably no stranger to the CRBN brand. I see them almost every time I play, and for good reason, as they are a long-standing manufacturer with a good lineup of paddles that can work for a variety of players. But in this video, I want to tell you about the top paddle in that CRBN lineup and why it's the CRBN 3X. And it's important to let you know that CRBN did send me this paddle, but they are not paying me for this review. They don't get to see it in advance or provide any input. And if you don't want to watch the whole video, no worries, I've got you. The CRBN 3X is a perfect blend between the 1X and 2X and is part of their power lineup, but you'll want to stick around for my thoughts on that. It's a hybrid shape available in both 16 and 14 millimeters and is really solid across every category, giving you good power, spin, control, and more, making it a useful tool no matter what level you're playing at. It's priced at $230, but you can get 10% off your order of the CRBN 3X or any other item from their shop by using the code PICKLEBALLBLAST at checkout. And if you're here for the in-depth review, then let's get to it. But first, be sure you've hit that subscribe button down below. And I think the right place to start is with the recent CRBN lineup that includes the 1X, the 2X, and now the 3X. Because at face value, this is marketed as a power series, but I think understanding where the 3X fits in their lineup is really important. The CRBN 1X is an elongated paddle, somewhat similar to the 3X, but built more for power. The 2X is their standard shape that leans more control within this X Power series. And to put it simply, the 3X is a hybrid shape that is similar but not identical to the 1X, and is really the middle ground between these two, truly giving you a great blend of power and control, a claim that is used all too often these days, I realize, but I feel is true in this case. The CRBN 3X is thermoformed, hybrid shape, has a Toray T700 carbon face, and I am specifically looking at the 16mm version, though it's also available at 14. It has a static weight between 7.8 to 8.1 ounces, a swing weight of 118, and a twist weight around 6.6. The grip length is 5.25 inches, and the circumference is 4.25 inches. With the basics out of the way, let's get into the most important categories to look at when considering a new paddle. Power is often at the forefront of people's minds when looking at a new paddle, and as I think you're going to find with most categories here, the CRBN 3X is solid. But this is an important category to talk about because it's certainly powerful enough. I feel like my drives and serves are powerful, with my serves coming in just under 50 miles per hour on average. But with all that said, I don't know that I would categorize it as a power paddle. I don't want anything misconstrued here. This paddle will give you solid power. But when I think of a power paddle, I think of the Gearbox or the Gen 3 Yolas. But this is actually a good thing for CRBN for most people. You see, those power paddles absolutely rip, but they often come at a cost, whether that's a very small sweet spot or so much power that it becomes incredibly difficult to control. And the CRBN 3X doesn't have these issues. So I think when you're considering a paddle, it's important to not just take the naming mechanism of the X series in this scenario, as it's a power series at face value, and rather understand what this paddle really offers you, which is a great all-court feeling paddle. Now that brings us to our next category, which is control. And as I mentioned, unlike a lot of pure power paddles, the control on the CRBN 3X is again super solid. It's not a control paddle, but it is a paddle that is very controllable, especially once you adjust to the feel off the face, which to me feels slightly more stiff and like muted than some other paddles that I've played with. This feel allows you to really know what to expect with the ball based on the input that you're giving it, which is a great thing with any paddle. Next up is pop, and this is always a tough one for me, as I find it really hard to test this, and rather it's very feel-based. So I would say this is above average pop, but nothing that's unmanageable. And of course, there are pros and cons that come with a high pop on a paddle. I've spent most of my time playing with the 6-0 Double Black Diamond, more than any other paddle, and I would say that the pop on the CRBN 3X feels pretty similar to the Double Black Diamond. Next up is spin, and the CRBN 3X really surprised me here. The surface doesn't feel crazy gritty, the dwell time doesn't feel like anything crazy either, and yet, the spin on the CRBN 3X came in at 2,043 RPM for me, which was higher than both the 6-0 Double Black Diamond and the Bread and Butter Shogun, which I was testing at the same time. Now let's talk about speed, and I would say this is average. The swing weight of 118 is on the upper end of middle, I'd say, so while it is going to be a bit slower in your hands compared to a super low swing weight paddle, It's not extreme, and while I have had paddles where I felt noticeably a bit slower, especially during my adjustment period, I never really felt that with the Carbon 3X. And lastly, as a visual person who works in a creative field, I always like to touch on the design of the paddles I review. Now, I love the Carbon logo. It's simple but cool, and I do like the pop of red on these paddles that wasn't around in their older ones. But beyond that, when it comes down to it, it's just kind of a standard design, so to speak. Now let's recap where this paddle really excels and where it falls short, and I think it starts with being such a great all-around paddle. A paddle like this is what I personally think most people should be playing with, especially below a certain level. It delivers a solid product in basically every category, and while it may not rank #1 overall in any single category, that really doesn't matter, and oftentimes, in my opinion, isn't what you should be after. On the other hand, I think there are two things that come to mind on the flip side. First up is the cost. $230 is a lot of money, and to be fair, while it is probably above average for a paddle, it's definitely not the most expensive paddle on the market. It also comes from a reputable company that isn't brand new in the industry, and that does have value to it. But even with the 10% discount using the code PickleballBlast, while it's a great paddle, there are lots of great paddle options out there, and it's quite possible to find one that works for you at a lower price point. The other thing that comes to mind isn't so much a con, as I explained it a bit earlier, but it's the way this paddle is marketed. If you were to not watch this review, randomly come across the Carbon 3X, see it's part of their Power series and buy it, I think there is the chance to be disappointed purely because of confusion. I didn't know a ton about this paddle before they sent it to me, and I expected it to hit more like a pure power paddle because I didn't read anything about it. And it actually ended up being way better than I expected because it wasn't a pure power paddle. But even so, using that word and having a power lineup these days can get confusing, so I think it's just important to know that this leans more all court, in my opinion. I hope you found this helpful. If you're looking for a well-rounded paddle that will deliver in all categories, I definitely recommend giving the Carbon 3X a try. If you've already hit with this paddle, I would love to hear your experience down below in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.